You're listening to Himalayan Adventure by Vaile. Chapter 21.
Isabelle threw her arms around Gulbenkian's neck and allowed herself to be picked up off the ground. She was sobbing. "It's all right, we're here now," Gull said over and over. "We've got you." Everybody clustered close, creating a pool of yellow torchlight with Isabelle and Gull in its center. Isabelle tried to speak, but all she managed to do was cry even louder. After a few deep breaths she gasped, "There are wolves out here, it's not safe for us to be out here." "It's okay," Burnmaster replied. "The wolves are dead, Lone Star must have killed them." "I wouldn't have thought that little black dog had so much fight in him." Isabelle slid back to the ground, frowning. "The wolves are dead?" she asked uncertainly. "We saw their bodies back up the ridge," Burnmaster replied. "3 of them? That's right, there were 3 wolves chasing me," she said, "but Lone Star can't have killed them." "Why not?" asked Burnmaster. "Because I saw the wolves kill him," she replied, her voice cracking with emotion. "They attacked him and he didn't have a chance." Burnmaster rubbed a hand over his chin, realizing that his comfortable theory about how the wolves had died was impossible. Looking at Gulbenkian, he asked, "So what killed the wolves?" Pemba had a pretty good idea what had happened, and as far as he was concerned, the less they mused over the fate of the dead wolves the better. It was unlikely that they would be able to deduce that 2 yetis had saved Isabelle, but he didn't want this conversation to continue any further. He pretended to shiver. "I don't know about all of you, but I'm starting to get cold," he remarked. "I say we head back to camp and get warmed up. It's not doing us any good standing out here in the freezing wind, talking about things that don't really matter. The most important thing is that Isabelle is okay." There were murmurs of agreement and they all started back up the ridge. Gulbenkian was mulling over what had happened. Turning to Burnmaster, he asked, "Is it possible that the wolves killed each other?" "Anything's possible, I suppose, but it's not very likely," Burnmaster replied. "The only thing I can think of is that something else killed them. The thing is, there aren't many animals that can kill a wolf, let alone 3 of them. A bear or a leopard maybe, but there aren't many of them in these parts." Twigger glanced around the darkness warily. "A bear or a leopard," he repeated. "I wonder if it's still around here." "How about we make a big detour around the dead wolves," said Burnmaster. "We don't want whatever killed the wolves to think that we're moving in on its kill." "Good idea," Pemba said quickly. On the way down the ridge, he had seen the dead wolves and wondered if Zaw and Abby had left any tracks in the area. The last thing he needed was for Burnmaster to start sniffing around the Yeti's trail. "There's no need for Isabelle to see all that again," he explained. "It might be, distressing." Maine, carrying several torches, led the group back up the ridge at a distance of several hundred meters from the dead wolves. Burnmaster asked Isabelle to recount all that had happened since she left the tent, and she did, leaving nothing out. She finished by saying that something large had flashed by her, and after that the wolves had disappeared. Burnmaster was quiet for a while and then said, "I had a look at the dead wolves as I was coming down the ridge. Their injuries weren't consistent with a bear or leopard attack. One of the wolves had a broken neck but no cuts at all. The other one had 3 long gashes on its underside that could have been caused by a leopard, but..." As he said that, Burnmaster was reminded of the 3 long gashes he had seen in the mattress in the Shabrubesi Hotel immediately after the burglary that had been foiled by persons unknown. Then he thought of the 3 unexplained gashes in a length of wood on the ground in the Kathmandu alley immediately after the robbery that had been foiled again by persons unknown. And now the signature slashes were turning up here in the mountains. On the other hand, he began to say and then fell silent. Flattop watched Burnmaster's face carefully. "On the other hand, what?" he asked. He wanted to squeeze the South African's neck until the thoughts popped out of his lying mouth, but he knew his brothers would not approve. Burnmaster looked up at the giant Korean. "Oh, I was just going to add that those gashes also could have been made by a bear," he said. "And now that I think about it, I remember an article some years ago about a bear that could kill a wolf with 1 hit from its forelegs. So I suppose a bear could have killed the 3 wolves after all." Flattop looked at him suspiciously but said nothing. Back at the camp, Burnmaster put Isabelle under strict orders never to wander off alone again. She nodded and crawled into her tent with Laheeti and Gulbenkian. When they were snug inside their sleeping bags, Isabelle whispered, "Tom saw something on the ridge, didn't he? Something he didn't tell Flattop about?" Gull nodded in the dark. "He'd spoken to Burnmaster about it on the way back. He thinks we have a guardian angel," he stammered. "And that's who saved me?" asked Isabelle. "He thinks so," Gull replied. Isabelle rolled over, glad to be safe and warm inside the tent. The guardian angel, whoever it was, had not managed to save Lone Star from the wolves. She felt a gnawing guilt that the little black dog had died to save her. The small kindness that she had shown him had been repaid 1,000-fold. As she drifted off to sleep, she wondered who the guardian angel was and why it had helped her. The Langtang Mountains, always dangerous, were now also a little mysterious. In the morning, Burnmaster rose early and returned to the ridge to collect Lone Star's body. It was there, untouched by scavengers, lying where the little black dog had made his last stand. Burnmaster buried him in the stony ground near the camp. The small grave was topped with a pile of rocks that would keep the scavengers away. On a football-sized stone, he scraped the dog's name and date of passing and placed it at the head of the grave. Before leaving the campsite, the 14-year-olds stopped at Lone Star's resting place and paid their last respects. Laheeti said a few words, not sure what was appropriate at a dog's funeral. Isabelle was glum. "Let's just find Nicky Zipster and get off this mountain," she said quietly, and then they walked past the grave one by one and continued on down the trail. They said little for the next hour. The wind from the previous night had calmed to an icy breeze that chilled their noses underneath their sunglasses. Single file, they followed Burnmaster onto a gray, boulder-strewn plateau that was like an empty moat at the base of an enormous castle. Up ahead, the mountain they intended to climb seemed impossibly high. "I can't believe how big this thing is," said Laheeti. "The closer we get, the bigger it becomes," Twig observed, "so the trick is not to get any closer." "But that means we'll never get to the top of it," said Isabelle. "And I came to Nepal to climb a Himalayan mountain. I thought we came to find a yeti," said Twig. "That too, but the way things are going, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to tick that box," Isabelle said. This was music to Pemba's ears. "What makes you say that?" he asked innocently. "Well, we've been here for 5 days and so far no sign of a yeti," she replied. Pemba smiled to himself. "A lot of foreigners come to Nepal looking for yetis and never find them," he explained, "because yetis don't exist, of course." Isabelle sighed. "Not being found is not the same thing as not existing," she muttered. 20 meters ahead, Burnmaster took off his rucksack and leaned against a boulder, waiting for the others to catch up. This meant it was time for a rest. When the others arrived, they sat down and drank thirstily from their water bottles. The Koreans turned up one by one. Mohawk dumped his rucksack on the ground and sat down heavily on a sofa-sized rock. "This is as far as I go," he declared. "You're tired?" asked Burnmaster. He had never known the Koreans to get tired. "No, I mean I'm going to wait here while you all climb up the mountain," Mohawk grunted. This statement raised Burnmaster's eyebrows. "You're not coming?" he asked. Mohawk shook his head. "I don't do heights," he said. "Then what are you doing in the Himalayas?" asked Burnmaster. "Well, I've been wondering that myself," Mohawk said with a sigh. Burnmaster shrugged. "Suit yourself. It'll be good to establish a base camp down here and you can look after some of our stuff." Flat Top arrived and heard the tail end of the conversation. He looked at his brother. "Not going up," he grunted. "Nope," replied Mohawk with a matter-of-fact tone. "I figured as much," Flat Top said. He moved past his brother and continued on toward the mountain, not bothering to wait for the others. Isabelle watched the rude Korean go and then turned back to Mohawk. "You mean you came all this way and you don't want to climb to the top?" she asked. "I can see perfectly well from here," Mohawk replied. "Seeing as Mohawk is staying, perhaps you three should stay here too," suggested Burnmaster. "It would be safer." Isabelle and Laheeti exchanged alarmed glances. "Safer than what?" asked Isabelle. "In case you forgot, I almost got eaten by wolves last night. How many wolves are there on the mountainside?" "Probably none," Burnmaster conceded. Isabelle and Laheeti argued with the South African for a minute until they got their way. Then Maine arrived and noticed the grins on their faces. "What are you all looking so happy about?" he asked. "We don't have to stay here at base camp with Mohawk," said Laheeti. Maine looked at his brother. Nothing more was said on the issue. When the rest of the group resumed the trek, Maine stayed behind. "I can't climb that mountain," Mohawk said eventually. "You know I can't." "That's not true. You can do it," Maine said. "We can do it together." Mohawk shook his head stubbornly. Maine tried a different tack. "You think I like being in the mountains?" he pressed. "Every night out here it's so dark I almost crap my pants, but I haven't given up and neither should you." "It's different for you," explained Mohawk. "When it gets too dark, you just switch on a torch, but when the mountain gets too high, I can't just switch on the ground." "I don't think we should split up," said Maine. "And I don't care what you think, I'm not climbing it," Mohawk snapped. "Don't do it for me, brother," Maine grunted. "Do it for the kids." Mohawk frowned and glanced at Maine. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "Remember what Flat Top said in Shabrubesi," Maine replied. "If we find Nicky Zipster on the Yala Glacier, Burnmaster and the others will be surplus to requirements. If he gets it into his head to make them disappear, I don't know if I can stop him on my own. I need you there with me. Gulbenkian will be there, Mohawk said, so you won't need me. Mane shook his head and said, Gulbenkian is untested. I have no idea what he can do. I need you with me. Mohawk's expression darkened as he wrestled with this conundrum. His unreasoning fear of heights was a constant in his life. He factored it into every decision he made. Other people climbed ladders, clambered up ropes, and jumped out of aeroplanes. He never wanted to be any more than 1 meter off the ground. Scaling a mountain, particularly one as high as the Yala Peak, was absolutely out of the question. But he had grown fond of Isabelle, Laheeti and Twig since he met them, and the thought of Flattop killing them caused him great mental anguish. In his mind, he pictured their little bodies cast into a black crevasse, broken, never to be seen again. He squeezed his sledgehammer-sized hands into fists and growled, "When we're climbing that mountain, if I slip," Mane gave Mohawk's shoulder a friendly punch. "I'll catch you, brother," he said quickly. Mohawk looked at Mane. "Yeah, you'd better," he grunted.
That is the end of this chapter. To listen to the next chapter on YouTube or to purchase the digital ebook from Amazon, see the links in the description.